Hello, my name is Dr. Erin Foster Abernathy, and it is my pleasure to present to you today the research that I'm doing in collaboration with Dr. Elizabeth Anderson at Florida International University as part of my postdoctoral position. The title of this talk is How Do Race and Gender Influence Environmental Flows in Florida? I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement statement. Unless you are a Native American, on your native homelands, we are settlers on stolen land. Settler colonial society, academia, and myself have intentionally and unintentionally erased Indigenous peoples' history and culture. Acknowledging the original inhabitants and caretakers of the land we are occupying and whose land and water we are studying is a small step towards stopping these practices. So I'll read the land acknowledgement statement. Corvallis, Oregon, where I am currently living, is located in the homelands of the Ampine-Foo Band of the Kalapuya. Today, their descendants are part of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians. Our research is taking place in Florida, and the indigenous peoples of Florida are the Timakua, Ais, Calusa, Tocobaga, Tuquesta, Tiano, Muskogee, and Seminole. Today, the Miccosukee tribe of Indians and the Seminole tribe of Florida are the two federally recognized tribes in Florida. I also included this map and website. It's a searchable, the one on the, the map. It's searchable and it has links to the websites of many of these tribes who are alive and well today. I encourage you to go here and learn about the original stewards of the land on which you live and work. I also encourage you to dig deeper into the anti and decolonial movements. Readings is a good place to start, and the Decolonize All the Things and Clear Lab websites provide some good resources to help get you started. So let's start with this premise. The United States is a country founded through land seizure from Native peoples and the enslavement of African Americans. The US continues to grapple with this colonialist and racist legacy, as I highlight with this photo of water protectors from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe protesting the Dakota Access Pipeline. Given these foundations and their continued influence on current social, economic, and political systems, it is indisputable that these forces affect all aspects of life and work in the US. Although the visibility of the Standing Rock, Black Lives Matter, and Me Too movements have certainly increased awareness within the US population that colonialism, racism, and sexism persist, there is still work to be done translating that awareness into fundamental policy change. So an opportunity for policy change lies with environmental flows. So what are environmental flows, you ask?
Environmental flows describe the flows of water required to sustain a river's ecosystems. Our job is to protect the natural flows because all waterways are unique, complex, and dynamic systems. We can use environmental flows to mimic the natural flow pattern of a river and balance the water needs of both society and the environment. Water connects us to the environment. We rely on it for power generation. We extract it for agriculture and industry. We use it for recreation. We alter its flow with dams and stormwater drainage, and it is further impacted by climate change. These uses can affect a river's flow and its ability to sustain wildlife and the communities that depend on it.
So after this clip, the World Wildlife Fund video goes on to list these 5 factors as important in any flows that popped up here: hydrology, geomorphology, biology, water quality, and connectivity. And they mean connectivity of like fish, biological organisms. So although freshwater is a critical resource for ecosystems, it's also, and humans is the uses they've listed here, the science and development of environmental flows has historically focused on ecological needs, as we just saw in this video. But this is changing. The revised Brisbane Declaration and Global Action Agenda on Environmental Flows emphasizes the need to have full and equal participation of people of all cultures. So focusing on that human aspect. So people of all cultures, and respect for their rights, responsibilities, and systems of governments in environmental water decisions. Still, water management, so even after this call, water management, the field for which environmental flows has emerged, has largely been and continues to be a field dominated by men, particularly white men in the US. As threats from climate change increase, how we manage our freshwater resources will become even more critical for marginalized communities. So to operationalize the call from Brisbane, we need to examine whether e-flows adequately address racial and gender inequality. In addition to climate change, the shifting racial demographic of the US will necessitate a reassessment of how we manage our resources, particularly water resources. 5 states are currently majority minority, and more will become so in the 2020s, this decade. And that includes Florida. To anticipate the need of a changing population under shifting climate conditions, community trust in and engagement with entities managing water resources must be strengthened. Those involved in freshwater conservation and management will need to address the history of racism and sexism in the US and their own implicit biases in how they choose to do science and whom they choose to interact with to make those decisions. So Florida, with its shifting demographics and 100+ year history of water management, presents a unique area of study for how race and gender influence water management, particularly environmental flows. In 1972, the state legislation created these 5 water management districts that we have shown here, with responsibilities for regional water resource management and environmental protection. The 4 core mission areas of the districts are water supply, water quality, flood protection and floodplain management, and natural systems. These districts have responsibilities that are expanded from what previous water-focused state organizations, like the expanded responsibilities. And those previous organizations were more focused on controlling flooding and draining areas for housing and agriculture. South Florida and the Everglades especially have seen extensive draining and channelization of waterways to make way for expanded population and economic growth, as you can see on that chart from showing the water movement from the Everglades to where it currently is now with canal systems. So each district is tasked with setting minimum flows for surface water and minimum levels for groundwater and surface water. The following elements are to be considered as outlined in the state legislation: recreation in and on the water, fish and wildlife habitats and the passage of fish, estuarine resources, transfer of detrital material, maintenance of freshwater storage and supply, aesthetic and scenic attributes, filtration and absorption of nutrients and other pollutants, sediment loads, water quality, and navigation. So that's what's currently in the list of what's being considered. So what are my questions? I think there's an urgent need to consider and incorporate social equity and environmental justice concerns into everyday freshwater conservation and management work. We must weave explicit recognition of inequalities into how we do science, as well as the projects we choose for conservation practice. We do this by comparing e-flow practices, or we're going to study this within the water districts by comparing e-flow practices across management units within Florida. I'm looking specifically at what methods are effective for increasing racial and gender diversity, and does the increased diversity increase the likelihood of meeting the district's goals? Secondly, I seek to build an effective framework for incorporating equity practices into environmental flow management within South Florida, so one of those districts specifically. I will then ask whether this equity framework increases community engagement and trust. So what are our methods? Well, we determine for each district if and how race, gender, and community values are considered when assessing minimum flows over the past 5 years. So this information was collected by reading publicly available documentation on the process to determine how minimum flows are currently set, and through conducting interviews. We're currently conducting those interviews over Zoom and phone with Florida Water Management District employees from each of the 5 districts. Additionally, in those districts that we found to be addressing increasing racial and gender equity, we will quantify if there is a positive correlation between meeting the stated e-flow management goals compared with districts not seeking to increase diversity. So to determine the ability of a district to meet those goals or not, we examined all publicly available flow data for the district and determined how many days the district did or did not meet its flow goals. So for goals unrelated to measurable ecological outcomes, such as like community satisfaction, we utilized a semi-structured survey for both the employees and the community members to quantify perceptions related to the agency's success in achieving these goals. We coded responses to determine whether respondents believe the goals were met or not. With these response variables, so again, number of e-flow, number of days that minimum flows were met, as well as respondents' beliefs concerning success, we compared quantitative conservation outcomes between districts that have implemented increased equity and those that have not. At the management unit scale, here we go. At the management unit scale, I will work with the Office of Women, Equity, and Diversity at the sponsoring institution, so that's Florida International University, the district employees specifically for the South Florida Water Management District, and community members to develop a framework that adheres to and fulfills the district's stated needs and desires for increased racial and gender equity. So we're going to do that within their office and with community engagement. And I will conduct surveys with employees before and after we do this work together. Surveys will quantify racial and gender literacy of employees and their perceptions about their ability to address inequity with respect to water management. I will also review the strategic goals of the office and the schedule in which they were reviewed. So through community surveys, I will quantify community engagement with and trust in the district and general perceptions of racial and gender equity with respect to Florida water management. So at the state level, I anticipate that some Florida water management districts do incorporate practices that seek to increase equity, as Florida is one of the most diverse states in the US. I predict that those districts working to maximize equity, there will be a higher likelihood of meeting minimum flow standards and goals that shift to reflect those of the community. At the district level, so the South Florida Water Management District, I anticipate that the equity framework that I build will increase equity and how e-flows are set, in addition to increasing community engagement. Specific products I will work towards or to look for. So if you're interested in this work later, the products I'm creating is I will publish my research and survey findings along with this equity framework in a scientific publication. And I will also create an interactive online tool that allows the public and water managers to experiment with this framework and visualize results. Ultimately, it's my hope that this research and resulting environmental flow framework will broaden participation in science, deepen relationships between conservation practitioners and the public in Florida and more broadly, and will produce conservation outcomes for ecosystems and humans that are long-lasting and equitable. Additionally, this framework works at the local level to operationalize the call from the Brisbane Declaration for full and equal participation of people from all cultures and respect their rights. And it helps governments think about their responsibilities to people when it comes to e-flows, in addition to the ecological and economic metrics that are currently set forth. I would like to acknowledge FIU and specifically the College of Arts, Science, and Education for funding my postdoc position. I would also like to thank the FIU's Office for Research and Economic Development for providing funding to attend this conference. I would like to thank the Florida Water Management District employees and the community members for being willing to share their time, energy, and experiences with me. I have many folks to thank within the Tropical Rivers Lab at FIU for all the support they've given me this year. Our meetings and virtual interactions have brought me much joy and energy. So thank you, Beth, Claire, Tiago, Melissa, Daniela, Brenna, Nati, Nadia, and Andrea. I look forward to continuing to work with you all. Thank you.